Welcome to the ranch. Today, I want to talk about how people lived with the land. Harsh land when there was little room for air. Vikings didn't farm land the way we imagine it today. They didn't arrive into the north with neat rows and tidy fields, plan from civilization. They arrived at the edge of what was possible, and they made that land work because they didn't have any other choice. To understand Viking gardening, you have to erase the idea of gardening as a hobby. For the Norse, growing food was not about abundance or comfort. It was about survival and resilience in a harsh and unpredictable world. The land they worked was thin, rocky, cold, and often unforgiving. The summers were short, winters were too long, soil fertility was fragile. A single failed season could mean starvation. There's no outside supplies to fall back on, no distant markets, no modern fertilizers. What they grew, gathered, and stored had to carry them through the year, or they did not survive. Viking gardens were not separate from the landscape, they were woven into it. Fields were small by modern standards, but they were carefully chosen. South facing slopes mattered, sheltered valleys mattered, proximity to water mattered. The Norse understood microclimates long before the word even existed. A field a few yards higher or lower could mean the difference between a harvest and a loss. They did not rely on a single crop. Barley was the backbone of Viking agriculture because it matured quickly and it tolerated cold. But it was not alone. Oats, rye, sometimes wheat were grown where conditions allowed. Root crops such as turnips filled an essential role, providing calories that could be stored through the winter. Cabbage and onions appeared in small garden plots near longhouses where manure, household waste enriched the soil. Animal manure was not waste, it was life. Viking gardens were fed by livestock, and livestock were fed by the land in return. This was not a closed system by accident, it was necessity. Livestock were central to Viking survival, not only for meat, but for milk, wool, hides, and fertility. Cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, and horses were all part of the system. Each animal played an important role. Sheep converted rough pasture into wool and meat. Cattle turned grass into milk and manure. Pigs foraged in woodlands, eating acorns, roots, and scraps. Horses worked fields and transported goods. Winter feeding was one of the greatest challenges the Vikings faced. Animals had to survive months of cold when pasture disappeared. Haymaking was therefore critical. Meadows were not wasted land, they were carefully maintained hayfields. Grass was cut, dried, and stored by hand. Losing a hay harvest could mean losing animals, which meant losing fertility, labor, and future food. Forests were not wilderness to the Vikings, they were managed landscapes. Woodlands provided fuel, building materials, forage, berries, mushrooms, and wild game. Trees sheltered fields from wind, shrubs stabilized the soil. Grazing was controlled not by fences as we know them, but by seasonal movement and community rules. Tools were simple but effective. The yard plow scratched the soil rather than turning it really deep, preserving fragile topsoil. Iron tools were precious and maintained carefully. Every cut, every stroke of labor, it had to matter. Waste was simply not an option. The Vikings did not separate gardening from hunting and fishing. Wild foods, they were part of the system. Fish, sills, birds, berries, and wild greens filled nutritional gaps and reduced pressure on the crops. This kind of flexibility is one of the reasons Norse settlements survived in marginal environments for centuries. Perhaps most importantly, Viking agriculture was communal. Land was used, shaped by law, tradition, and cooperation. Fields, meadows, and grazing areas were governed by shared rules. Survival depended not just on individual skill, but on a collective discipline. One person overgrazing or misusing land could harm the entire community. There was no romantic idea of living close to nature. Nature was powerful, indifferent, and often dangerous. The Vikings respected it because they had to. Their systems were built to bend rather than break, to absorb bad years, poor harvests, and loss. When we look at Viking gardens today, we shouldn't look at them as primitive or inefficient. We should see them as highly adaptive, efficient systems, shaped by necessity. They were resilient because they were honest about their limit. Vikings didn't conquer the land, they negotiated with it. And that, it may be a profound lesson they left behind. Thanks for watching. Check back in on me from time to time. Always doing something new.